In this video, I explain the theory and science behind emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence is kind of like if IQ is intellect, emotional intelligence is EQ for your emotions and state of mind. So in this video, we're going to break down again the kind of scientific theory behind this. We'll explain why it's important, how it works, and how you can actually cultivate it or enhance your own emotional intelligence, which is an essential part of happiness at both in work and in life, and of course, your kind of productivity and outcomes. So let's get into it. Now, this concept is pretty well researched in the scientific literature at this point, and it was primarily advanced by a gentleman named Daniel Goleman. And so he kind of did a lot of research into this and developed a conceptual model, and I'll actually show the model now as I briefly talk through it. And you see on one side you have recognition and regulation, and the other you have self and other. So you can think of emotional intelligence, this theory, as your ability to recognize and regulate your own emotions. In other words, you are able to see, what are the emotional states within yourself, and then how can you manage them? And importantly, it has an external facing component as well, that you're able to understand other people's emotions and sort of manage them or interact with them in a way that's effective. And so you see in this first quadrant, when you have recognition and then you have yourself, you put those together, and of course, that's self-awareness. Then you also have that same recognition piece, but thinking about other people, that's social awareness, or what we can think of as empathy. And then the regulation or the management piece. So when you line that up with yourself, that's self-management, self-control, etc. And then when you line that up with other people, it's relationship management. So how well do you influence other, communicate with other, manage conflicts with other, leadership with others, perform when it comes to leadership, etc. So bring that back here. We can start to look at each one of those quadrants in a little more detail. So let's talk about self-awareness, right? This really is about the ability to recognize your own internal emotional states. And so you can think of this as almost two pieces. There's a recognition threshold, and then there is a loss of control threshold. So as you increase this first component of emotional intelligence, you're increasing your own EQ. What happens is your threshold for awareness is decreasing, but your threshold for losing control is increasing. So what do I mean by that? It means that, right now, let's say, if I have low emotional intelligence, I may be getting stressed and a little frustrated, and this anger is building up, but I don't even realize it. And then at some point, I just lose it and I go off. If you are lowering the threshold of awareness but raising the threshold of loss of control, what happens is that if I'm lowering my threshold of awareness, it means I'm more ready to notice, I'm feeling a little tense right now, or I can see there's a little bit of anger creeping in here, a little bit of stress. So I'm more able to recognize it. But when I raise the threshold of losing control, it's like, before, if it was like a 4 out of 10, I would just get pissed and I would lose it. Now it's got to be like a 9 or a 10. It's really got to get to me for me to lose it. So you can start to see how that fits in, right? And then you have, again, the recognition and the other piece. This is social competence. So empathy, more than anything, to be able to read and recognize how other people are feeling. Then we turn to self-management. So that's things like anger management, but also interestingly, it relates to your own adaptability. So this is also known as response flexibility. When you have some sort of stressor, there are many responses you can have, right? You can go smoke a cigarette. You can go cry. You can go drink a beer. You can go for a walk. You can slow your breathing, right? Some of those are better than others, but expanding your response flexibility or your repertoire of available responses would fit with self-management, right? Being kind of conscientious of yourself and able to manage your own emotions. And then finally, regulation and social. So this is how well do you manage others, right? How do you deal with people? How do you navigate their emotions skillfully, having first empathized or understood or identified them, and then, working with them effectively. So why is emotional intelligence important? Well, there's a lot of pieces I could talk about with this, but I'd say there's really two key factors. And the first one is your relationships. So it's been shown that relationship quality is pretty much the foundation for how happy we are and how long we live. Now, that insight is based on the Grant study from Harvard University, one of the longest running psychological studies of its kind. And that's pretty much what it showed, that money, status, achievement, all these things that we tend to think of don't really matter as much as the quality of your relationships. And I would argue that emotional intelligence is really the foundation for healthy, long-term, sustainable relationships, because you need to be able to manage your own emotions and the emotions of that other person and navigate them skillfully in order to manage conflict effectively, express appreciation, set, healthy emotional boundaries, etc. So the first part's relationships, and then the second part, of course, is your own mental health and your state of mind. Right? You can imagine that if you are more able to recognize your own emotional states, you kind of have a better sense of what's going on and how healthy you are mentally. And if you are able to better regulate them, right, you're able to kind of manage and adapt skillfully when you experience intense negative emotions, which we're all going to experience because they're part of life. And you can, think about ways to cultivate more positive and more beneficial emotions. So it's really, I would argue, it's emotional intelligence that kind of sets up the foundation for a happier life, because it's going to help you to have better relationships. Again, if you're able to recognize emotions really well in yourself and in others, and you're able to manage them in yourself and in others, you're going to be pretty darn easy to get along with and have good relationships. And at the same time, you're probably going to have a better handle on your own mental health. So the final piece here is, how can we actually train these things, or can we even train emotional intelligence? Well, the good news is you can, and under the recognition piece, right? Remember we said recognition of yourself or of others. This can be trained through mindfulness practices. So that's your standard meditation, right? Where you're trying to bring your attention back to the present moment again and again. Well, it's been found that people who do that actually are better at navigating and reducing a little bit the intensity of the fight or flight stress response. So, when you kind of get emotionally activated and something happens and you kind of like lose control, that is called an amygdala hijack, because this emotional center, instinctive part of your brain bypasses your logical reasoning and thinking. So you're literally not thinking. It's like if a car's coming at you and you just jump back before you even realize what happened. That's an amygdala hijack. It's been shown that meditative practices and increasing mindfulness can reduce the amygdala activation. So that amygdala hijack, right? You're more likely to kind of stay centered and stay in control. So I'll include a study on that, but broadly speaking, if you cultivate your mindfulness, which is really training your awareness to be more aware of whatever is happening in the present moment, naturally, you're going to be able to kind of direct that attention and awareness internally and be more perceptive of your own emotional states, or direct it externally and have a better chance of noticing other people's emotional states. And then can you train regulation of your own emotions or the emotions of others, or management? And again, you can. Of course, there's a rich, the classic example you think of is anger management, which studies out there show that it does work, but it's probably more effective if you think of these as psychological tools. So, a really simple example for self-management is breathing. So there's research that shows from Stanford University, really good studies on physiological sighing, which is a certain pattern of breathing that is a inhale, and then at the top you do another second sharp inhale, and then a longer, slow exhale, sort of like this. That something as simple as breathing that way for 5 minutes every single day has a fairly significant effect on reducing levels of anxiety. So then you can imagine in a self-management context, you have this awareness of, I'm feeling a little stressed or anxious or tense right now. I'm going to use that adaptable, flexible coping mechanism. Do a sigh, you calm down. And so by training that, just like you can develop a muscle or develop a certain motor pattern like swinging a baseball bat, you can get better at doing that. And then likewise, relationship management, same thing, you can get better at doing it through practice, but also in understanding some of the basic principles of influence, of conflict resolution, of leadership, etc., which we don't have time to get through all of that in this video, but there's plenty of literature out there on how to communicate effectively, how to manage conflict, and how to be an effective leader and manager, etc. So what we've learned, right, stepping back, is that this theory of emotional intelligence basically says that in the same way we have intellectual intelligence and IQ, we have emotional intelligence and EQ. In the same way you have certain genetic differences, maybe some people have higher intelligence than others, some people naturally have better emotional intelligence than others. But the big distinction here is that while IQ tends to be relatively stable and fixed over time, EQ is more malleable. It's something that can be trained by remembering the quadrants, right? We said recognition of self and then others, and then regulation or management of yourself and then others. By training within each of those domains, we can actually improve our emotional intelligence, which, like I said, is probably going to set a foundation to have higher quality relationships, both romantic, friends, professional, etc., and a better state of mind. So I hope this video on the science behind EQ was helpful. Again, a lot of that was drawing on the work of Daniel Goleman, which I include some information on down below, but EQ is absolutely an essential skill set for both happiness and performance. So here's a video that YouTube suggests that it thinks you will like, and I'll see you in the next one. This has been your happiness nerd, Jackson Kirchis.